I was careless and my husband saw me with my affair and got really mad. He then did this. I was careless, and my husband saw me with my affair and got really mad. He then did this. I was careless, and it was really so Satan-id of me to go outside my marriage and commit adultery. The consequences that I faced after I was caught by my husband having an affair outside our relationship were heartless and demonic. I didn't know that I'd been married to the devil himself for years. I really thought he was a sweet, loving, caring guy, but I guess I was wrong. Have you ever found yourself in a situation that you never thought you'd be in? I won't deny and say I was right for doing what I did because I was wrong, and I paid greatly for that. I had never thought that one day I would actually find myself in a demeaning situation. I really don't know what had pushed me to another man's arms and why I had taken that selfish and destructive decision. My husband's fault was loving me and taking care of me. Sometimes, being a housewife is kind of boring, but I was enjoying it because my husband was taking good care of me financially. If I were to try and explain why I cheated, surely you wouldn't believe nor understand my explanation. But I think greed and desire drove me to cheat on my husband. I mean, I was getting everything, and my husband was trying by all means to make sure that I was getting everything. Even making love, I was not suffering. Instead of being a loyal partner to my husband, I decided to be a dog and go outside my marriage to look for my desires somewhere else. The outcome of my abomination was not nice, and he made sure that I regretted every single thing that I had ever done to him in our marriage. My husband, Jim Carson, male, 32, and I, female, 32, met at one of the radio stations in Atlanta. He had come to the station for an interview for his phenomenal real estate and construction business. He also sponsored a few nursing homes and children's homes in Georgia, Atlanta. His work was amazing. I was the radio personality at that time, and I was the one to interview him. After the interview, well, it was also my time to knock off. Mind you, that time I was on an evening drive from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. After I had knocked off, I asked him to wait for me because I wanted to ask for a sponsorship for my non-governmental organization, NGO. We talked a bit about my NGO, and he gave me his business card, saying I should call during business hours. I took the card, but I didn't want to speak to any other person but him. So the following day, I called the number on the card, made my request, and was scheduled for an appointment to speak with Jim 2 days later. I went to my meeting with Jim, and we spoke about my wishes, how I wanted to help the community, and how much I wanted the sponsorship for it. Since then, we exchanged numbers. He told me that we would talk on the phone, and I was more than happy to hear that. We communicated a lot through the phone, and we were slowly getting close. After some weeks, he actually sponsored my NGO, and I couldn't be happier. He had once taken me to the orphanage that he was sponsoring, and I would say that the guy's work was truly amazing. One thing I loved about Jim was that he was so down to earth. The things he was doing for the people, he did because he loved doing them. He wasn't a social media person, so whatever he was doing, yes, he was taking pictures with the children and their helpers or nurses, but you would never find even one picture of what he was doing on social media. He made me believe that if you want to help someone, make sure you help them with an open and cleansed heart. Never try to help someone and then take pictures of what you did to flaunt it all over the internet. I was really moved by his humbleness and determination to help others. Months later, we had become close. He was a good advisor. Whenever I was confused or in need of some guidance and advice, I knew he was available for me no matter what. I knew I had someone I could trust and be free to talk to about anything, whether it was bothering me or making me happy. He used to help me brainstorm problem-solving techniques for my NGO, and I really loved every minute that I spent with him. You know when someone knows the real you within a few months of knowing each other? That was Jim. He knew me inside and out. I had learned a lot during the time of our friendship until we got married. Jim is a very smart man with many talents and a great mind. He is business-minded, and I like that about him. Because he would always chase the plan that he had or the dream that he had, we were friends for over 7 months, and I would say that time gave me a lot of opportunities to learn about Jim. Then, later, we got into a relationship. We were so inseparable. We would go together to visit the homes that he was sponsoring and help those who were in need. After we had officialized our relationship, we enjoyed our dating phase for a couple of months until he proposed on the 14th of February. I won't lie and say I wasn't happy because I was ecstatic. It felt like a dream come true. I mean, I had found my true love, my mentor, my best friend. I had found a whole package in one person, and I wouldn't ask for another partner other than him. Jim gave me everything and more. Then we got married during the summer holidays in June, and I was the happiest girl alive. Our marriage was bliss. I had everything that I had asked for. I had a loving, caring, and supportive husband. A few months later in our marriage, Jim and I had a talk about starting a family, and I was more than ready to start my own family with Jim and have our own minis. But in order for that to happen, Jim had asked me to take an early retirement from work, saying that I should get enough rest so that my body could be able to carry a child. I knew that if I were to retire or resign from my job early, Jim was going to take good care of me. Already, I was getting enough allowance from Jim for just being his wife. I was no longer using my work salary because my husband had been taking care of me financially. I never lacked anything, from intimacy to pampering, Jim's time and attention. Till today, I'm still trying to figure out what drove me to be living two lives while I had everything and more that I was getting from Jim. Time passed, and I was starting to get bored in the house. Jim was always busy at work, and it wasn't easy for him to give me much attention anymore because his construction business had been growing so fast and getting so many projects to do. They had a lot of building to do since they were in building construction. I was happy that my husband's businesses were going well because it meant more money was coming in, but it was really affecting our relationship. Our relationship had started to be all about him and his work and the projects that they were doing. I won't lie, it was kind of boring sometimes to me because it was always about work. Even if we were at the dinner table, he would be speaking about his upcoming project and the houses that he had to renovate for his real estate business. My husband is very determined and a hard worker, but sometimes I would miss him, you know? I would miss his jokes and everything. One day, I downloaded a dating app because I was bored and needed someone who could give me some action. I was tired of helping myself making love. As I was scrolling, I became a match with some handsome guy whose name was Eric Mayer, male, 33. When I looked through the guy's profile, I was really taken. I mean, he was what I needed in a man. He was slim, fit, with a fair complexion and making lovey green eyes. He made me feel wet just by looking at his pictures. So, the guy sent me a text, and we started talking through the app. Our conversations were flowing. It was like we had known each other for a very long time. We had chemistry, you know? The connection was there. We spoke for a couple of days, and we also exchanged numbers, so we were chatting on WhatsApp Messenger mostly. We had done some video calls, well, not just normal video calls, but those nasty and freaky video calls. I had thought that that man was just for me. Eric and I had the same desires, and we connected in a way that I can't even explain. Weeks passed, and Eric and I had met twice. To say I was taken by the guy's action would be an understatement. He was on top of this world. I'm not saying my husband didn't have action, but he was always busy, and I was not getting anything from him anymore except for his money and a few kisses here and there. But it was seriously boring. I needed some intimacy, someone who would be able to take me to another planet and make me see the ninth cloud. Since Jim wasn't there to help me with my desires, I used Eric for my satisfaction. The guy made sure that I was overly satisfied and that I had reached my climax. That's how our affair started. Well, we started calling our thing an affair when we had seen each other for the third time, and both of us couldn't get enough of each other. I was so much into the moment, to the point that I even lived a double life. I loved my husband a lot, but I loved what Eric was doing to me more. I had been living a double life, sneaking around behind my husband's back with a man named Eric. Their affair had been going on for months, hidden beneath layers of lies and deceit. I knew that if Jim was to find out, a lot would be destroyed and lost. I know what I did was really a selfish and greedy move, but my affair with Eric was only for intimacy and nothing more. Yes, there were feelings involved, but I couldn't love him just like I loved my husband. Eric and I were so careless, we didn't even think of the consequences of our actions. We were just caught in our own bubble of being intimate. I really loved how Eric was making me feel worthy of his time and attention. I know that Jim was always at work because he wanted us to have a good life and so that he would be able to take care of me without any struggles. One fateful day, as Eric and I were strolling through the park, lost in our own little world, we failed to notice my husband Jim approaching from the opposite direction. As we turned a corner, there he was, standing right in front of us, his expression a mix of shock and betrayal. The shock on his face quickly turned into anger as he confronted us, feeling betrayed and hurt by my actions. The way he was so angry, well, even angry, is a small word. He was enraged and unable to control his emotions. He lashed out at my affair, Eric, resulting in a physical altercation that left us all shaken and embarrassed. I didn't know what to do or say. I knew that if I were to say something, I would say something wrong and it would anger him more. I tried separating him from Eric because he was a eking Eric and was hurting him so badly. People were looking at us like they were given a free show. Jim was so heartless and the way he was angry, he wasn't stoppable. I tried to take him away from Eric, but he was just too strong. To the point that I even gained myself a fist unintentionally. When people saw that Jim was doing too much to Eric, they interfered and separated Jim from Eric. Eric was also fighting back, but Jim was overpowering him. I didn't know the kind of power that Jim had that day. I tried talking to him and told him that it wasn't what it looked like, every guilty person's statement, but he just glanced at me and told me that I would find him at home. He then left me there to imagine. After the chaotic scene, we all went our separate ways, but the tension and guilt weighed heavily on my mind. As I made my way back home, my mind kept wondering what was waiting for me at home, and I was kind of scared to go back home, especially when Jim was still angry. As much as I was really scared to face Jim, I knew that I had to somehow, so I would get over it and move on. I had hoped that he would believe my lie and forgive me. I didn't want to lose my husband just because of a fling and desires, but I guess sometimes hopes are only meant to stay as hopes. As I entered our empty house, the reality of what had just transpired hit me like a ton of bricks. When I got home, I couldn't believe my eyes. I was met by smoke that was coming from the car garage. I really thought that maybe Jim had done something to himself, so I rushed to where the smoke was coming from. When I reached the garage, I saw Jim holding all my new clothes, well, the clothes that were bought with his money. He was actually setting them on fire. I tried asking him to stop and somehow tried to take them off him, but he just slapped me and told me to go inside and take all my old rags and go out of his house. I couldn't believe what Jim was really doing. Sure, I had done him wrong in the worst way possible, and what I did was really unforgivable, but he didn't have a right to do what he did. He may have icked Eric, but he wasn't supposed to burn my clothes just because they were bought with his money. And to think that was not the worst thing that he had done. I really thought burning my clothes would be enough for him to satisfy his angry heart. Little did I know that the man of the house would actually do something bigger and more heartless than just burning my clothes. A few days later, I went back to my apartment that I had lived in when I was still working at the radio station. I respected Jim's wish of me moving out of the house, but to say I was heartbroken would be an understatement. I was shattered. I had no clothes and only my old ones, which no longer fit my body. As I was in the apartment, I had bought a few groceries that would last me for a couple of days until Jim calmed down and maybe considered fixing our marriage. I missed him so much, and I had realized that being away from him made me feel incomplete. 1 month later, my landlord came to me and asked for the rent money for the month. Yep, I had stayed there for the whole month, still waiting for Jim's call. Maybe I had tried calling him and sent him so many text messages, hoping that he would get back to me at least. I told the landlord that I would go to the shops and withdraw the rent money. When I got into the grocery store, I had already bought everything that I needed, and when I got to the pay register, I got the shock of my life. As I was taking out my items from the trolley, I tried swiping my card, but the card just declined. I tried several times and even tried other cards to see if they would go through, but no, they all declined. I even went to the ATM, but I only got an ATM slip. It was really frustrating and embarrassing because I had made other people wait in line for like 15 minutes while I was trying to withdraw the cash but failing. I then decided to go to the bank's branch to find out what was happening and why my money was not coming out on all my cards. When I got to the bank, I was assisted and was told the most unbelievable thing ever. I was told that my accounts had no money and the other account that Jim had opened for me was blocked and reported as a fraudster account. I just couldn't believe Jim. Mind you, at that time, I had no food in the apartment. I hadn't paid rent, meaning my life was just fucked up. Jim managed to ruin my life just because of an affair that I had with Eric. The worst part is that he didn't even want to give me a chance to explain myself. Even though he wasn't going to believe me, I felt the need to explain myself to him so he could understand why I had done what I did. I was feeling neglected, for heaven's sake, and it was all his fault. I'm not saying he wasn't supposed to focus on his work and his projects, but he had to remember that he had a wife that he had left in the house that also needed his time and attention. I needed him. I needed his attention, time, and affection, but he wasn't there. I was faced with the aftermath of my choices and the consequences of my infidelity, feeling a mix of regret, shame, and confusion. I just didn't know how to recover from the whole thing. Jim had hammered the last nail in my life. He had completely destroyed me, and I had not come back from it. I didn't even have any cash on me. I knew then and there that I had to go back home. I called my mother and asked her to fetch me. Unfortunately, she wasn't around, but I was lucky enough because she sent me some cash that would take me from Georgia to Virginia Highland. My heart was so shattered. I even thought of doing the worst to myself, but I would think of my mother and how she would feel. My mother was really disappointed in me when she learned about what had really happened between Jim and me. She asked me once, but I didn't give her straight answers. I told her lies. I just couldn't bring myself to tell her what had really happened to my marriage. I think she called Jim and asked what had really happened between us because a day after I had told her the lies, she came to my room with rage written all over her face. She was super angry and disappointed. She asked why I had acted like a hook and went outside my marriage and committed adultery. The worst part, gallivanting with my affair in public, knowing very well that my husband is a traveling man. He goes everywhere for his businesses. I knew that what I did would have consequences and bad outcomes, but I wasn't expecting something so big. My life was literally ruined, but I guess it was karma and it had visited my doorstep earlier than I had expected. I know I had hurt Jim in the worst way possible, but did he really have to avenge himself like this? I stayed in my room for months, trying to come to terms with what had happened to my marriage. 2 weeks after I had been home, a postman delivered an envelope on my doorstep, and I just couldn't believe my eyes. I had hoped that maybe Jim would come back to his senses since he hadn't sent the divorce papers. So, he waited for weeks to send divorce papers after he had made sure that I was down and out. I was really shattered. I was depressed. I didn't even want to face the outside world. All I wanted was to disappear, at least go to a place where no one knows me. I spent months indoors and decided that it was time to move on. With my mother's help, of course, she got me help, a therapist that spent a lot of time trying to make me open up about my marriage troubles. It took her 2 weeks to make me open up, and I was really grateful for her patience. I eventually opened up and tried to let go of the past and focus on the future. In a moment of clarity, I knew I had to make things right and face the music for my actions. A few weeks later, I was slowly getting back to being my old self, and I was trying to pick up the pieces that had been broken. I knew that in order for me to move on, I had to start by forgiving myself and forgiving Jim. So, I sat down in my room and wrote a heartfelt letter to my husband, pouring out my remorse and asking for his forgiveness. I know that I had done him wrong, and I was really regretful of my actions. I was driven by greed and desires that clouded my eyes and made me make bad decisions. It was really a lot to take in, but I knew that bit by bit, I had to move on and live my life to the fullest. I had even applied for jobs in different radio stations. I had hoped that with the experience and the years that I had spent at Atlanta radio station, they would work in my favor and maybe get me a space. My mother was the support system that I needed and my strength to get me going. I would never trade that woman for anything. She is truly my rock and my fortress. She made me believe that everything would be okay and that I would heal eventually. My separation from Jim really destroyed me. I had thought I would never be able to get up, but by the grace of God, I did get up stronger than ever. What I owe myself now is forgiving Jim for the destruction that he caused in my life. I really want to move on, but it seems like there is something pulling me back, and it is longing for Jim. Please help me because I really don't know how I can approach Jim. Please advise me on this one. My husband decided to destroy me and our son's life because my son supported my affair. Hey Reddit, I am at a point in my life where I feel isolated and lost, constantly questioning my marriage and the emotional disconnect I have with my husband. It is incredibly difficult for me to admit that my spouse, whom I once believed to be my soulmate, seems devoid of emotions, which have led me to jeopardize my marriage and also my son's future. I am writing this post to share my story and hopefully receive some advice and support from all of you. To provide some context, my name is Ann, 33F, married to Craig, 35M, for 7 years. We met in college, and our love story was nothing short of magical. We were deeply compatible and shared countless moments of laughter, vulnerability, and intense emotional connection during our courtship. I got pregnant before we even talked about getting married. I convinced Craig that we would be wonderful parents and that we should go ahead with the pregnancy. We were gifted with a baby boy whom we named Andrew. We married when Andrew was 3, and we had saved enough money to move into a new house. However, as time went on and we settled into married life, I began to notice a growing emotional void between us. It felt as though a switch had been flipped, and suddenly Craig became emotionless. Whenever I expressed my love, happiness, or even concerns, his response was often blank or devoid of the expected range of emotions. In numerous instances, I probed him, asked him if anything was wrong, or if I had done something to upset him, only to be met with nonchalant replies, brushed off concerns, or complete silence. The emotional disconnect had become suffocating, leaving me feeling unloved, unimportant, and ignored. I tried countless times to initiate conversations about our emotions, seeking common ground and attempting to understand his perspective, but it always ended in frustration and further distance between us. I tried suggesting couples therapy, hoping it would help bridge the gap, but he always brushed it off, claiming that everything was fine and that we could work through it ourselves. However, it was evident that our efforts had been futile, and my heart ached knowing that something was deeply wrong in our relationship. It is essential to clarify that Craig was not devoid of all emotions. He could express occasional glimpses of affection, like hugging or holding hands, but they seemed mechanical and devoid of real connection. It was all these small moments that often provided me with a flicker of hope, making me believe that there might be a way to reignite the emotional fire we once had. When I saw him occasionally playing with our baby, I would feel that there might be something that he has been holding back and not letting go, which was pushing him away from us. Despite all the efforts for more than 7 years, things were still platonic between us. Our making love life was non-existent, and even as a father, Craig was doing a terrible job. To put it very plainly, he thought that providing us with all kinds of materialistic items was enough to keep us happy, and that was the role of a father in a relationship. I tried to explain to him that he needs to be more involved in Andrew's upbringing and try to set a good example as a father whom he could look up to. All my efforts were in vain, as Craig showed little to no interest in Andrew's care and development. My son Andrew, who is 10 years old, is someone I cherished a lot. When he was a toddler, Craig and I had decided that he would be going to one of the best Ivy League colleges, and we would make everything possible for him to get into one of them. We started interviewing a lot of tutors who could help him right from this age to prepare and make him ready for the exams to get into an Ivy League college. We finalized on one tutor who had an impeccable resume. He was an ex-Harvard student with an inclination towards teaching. So we decided to settle on him and made arrangements in the guest bedroom for him to be staying with us so that he had enough time to observe Andrew and work on his shortcomings. After a week, the new tutor arrived and introduced himself as Joseph. He looked much younger than his pictures, and I could tell that he took very good care of his body. I let Andrew show him around the house and to his room so that they get a little time to interact with each other before they start off with serious studies. Andrew was back after 10 minutes and looked very impressed and excited to see his new tutor. Joseph became a part of the family very soon. He would have meals with us and help me around the house. When Andrew was at school, we would talk about Andrew and his progress, and then our conversations would drift to different topics. I felt really comfortable talking to him, and it did not feel like I was being forced to play the role of a happy wife. He made me feel comfortable in my own skin. Over time, it felt like this emotional void that triggered numerous self-doubts due to Craig's behavior kept disappearing. I no longer felt that I was the problem or that I must have unknowingly caused Craig to behave like a normal person. As days went by, my conversations with Joseph became more about me and less about Andrew. We both got pretty close to each other, and I felt like all the love that I had been craving for all these years was right in front of me. I could see that Joseph also kept stealing glances at me when no one was around. It was very difficult to curb the attraction we had for each other, especially when there was just the two of us at home. We tried pretty hard to keep our distance from each other till Andrew was back from school. When I pictured us three spending time together, it looked like a perfect family, something that was difficult to imagine with Craig being so distant from us. I started making up this imaginary family in my head with me, Andrew, and Joseph in it. One day, I just gave in to my temptation and made my moves on Joseph. The way Joseph kissed me made me feel butterflies in my stomach, which had never happened before. It felt like true love, as I knew that I settled for Craig for the security of his wealth and not actually because I loved him. Andrew was fast to notice that there was something going on between me and Joseph and asked me if I liked Joseph. I was scared that he might tell Craig about us, but instead he told me that he really liked Joseph and was happy to see us together. I sighed in relief that Andrew had a better father figure to look up to and not just learn from Craig about how to treat his wife. For kids, I realized that I had made a mistake by choosing Craig solely for his wealth, and it was clear that my heart belonged to Joseph. Andrew's acceptance of our relationship brought me a sense of relief and hope for a healthier future for our family. One day, Andrew was at school. Joseph and I were having fun with our usual banter. We were doing the dishes, throwing water on each other, and having a good time. Joseph pulled me closer and kissed me when we heard something fall. When we looked in the direction, we saw Craig standing near the kitchen door, staring at us angrily. I pushed Joseph away from me when Craig walked angrily towards us and slapped me. He asked Joseph to pack his bags and leave. I was terrified as I had not seen Craig this angry ever. I could not even comprehend anything as I was so scared of what he might do if I tried to explain myself. Joseph left quietly without a word, packed his bags, and disappeared. I did not even dare to come in front of Craig with the fear of what he might do. I locked myself in the bathroom and kept crying, unable to understand how I should approach this situation. I knew I had to gather my thoughts and find a way to address Craig's anger, but the fear and confusion overwhelmed me. As I sat in the bathroom, I desperately tried to come up with a plan to navigate this difficult situation without further aggravating Craig's anger. When it was time for Andrew to be back from school, Craig started pounding on the door and asked me to come out to talk. Very reluctantly, I opened the door, as I knew that I could not hide in the bathroom forever. When I came out, he pulled me with his hand and took me downstairs to sit on the couch. Andrew came home with his results for the essay that he had aced. He kept screaming for me and Joseph to come and take a look at what he had achieved. As he walked in, he saw Craig sitting on the couch and was a little surprised. Craig told Andrew to come and take a good look at his mother, who has been doing all sorts of nonsense behind his back. He pulled me by my hair and asked me to face Andrew and tell him what I had been up to. He then forced Andrew to take a look at me and make sure he does not choose a person like me to be his wife in the future. I felt disgusted by the way Craig was me in front of Andrew, and the fact that he was just a 10-year-old was upsetting me. I could see Andrew being scared and also confused by the way Craig was reacting. Before I could say something, Andrew told Craig that he knows about me and Joseph and that he was happy to see his mother happy. Andrew said that Craig had never been available to spend time with me or him, and that was the reason why we had taken a liking to Joseph, who made us happy and looked like a real family. I was taken aback by how much a small kid could observe and understand, which Craig unfortunately wasn't able to understand. This was enough to enrage Craig even more. Craig looked shocked to hear all of this from Andrew's mouth and slapped me pretty hard. He blamed me for corrupting his son's mind and making him look like a bad person. I told him that I had nothing to do with anything Andrew was saying, as I never showed him in the bad light. He told me to stop acting like a good person and start showing my true colors. I knew that there was no point in talking to Craig and trying to explain to him that there was nothing I told Andrew against him for him to talk this way. Craig got up from the couch and took Andrew and me by our arms and locked us up in the basement. He told me that we would have to stay in the basement until we realized what mistake we had committed. I could understand that he was angry and upset with me for cheating on him, but why was he punishing Andrew? I told him to take Andrew out of the basement and that I was the only person worthy of punishment. He told me that since I had corrupted Andrew's mind, it was my responsibility to put some sense into him so that he understands that what his mother had done is wrong. He told me to teach Andrew that infidelity is a crime, no matter the circumstances, and until he understands that, we both stay locked in the basement. I pleaded with him, explaining that punishing Andrew was unfair and that it was my mistake alone. However, he remained adamant, insisting that teaching Andrew the consequences of infidelity was crucial for his moral development. Reluctantly, I accepted my role in guiding Andrew towards understanding the gravity of the situation. For the next 3 days, we were in the basement and Craig gave us very little food and water, just enough to survive. I was fuming with anger with the way he was treating his only son, who had absolutely no fault in any of this. I was begging Craig to let Andrew out of the basement and make sure he had good nutrition and a good sleep. He kept denying my request and told me that this will make him suffer, to make him realize what is right and what is wrong. After 3 days, he pulled Andrew out of the basement and kept me locked in. I don't know what he spoke to Andrew, but I was happy that he was not putting him back inside. However, my relief was short-lived as I soon realized that Craig's treatment towards me was even worse than before. He subjected me to constant verbal abuse and neglect, leaving me desperate for any sign of kindness or escape. I am sharing my story with you, Reddit, in search of guidance, advice, or similar experiences from those who have faced this emotional disconnect in a marriage. How did you navigate this challenging situation? Are there any books, articles, or resources that you found helpful in understanding and resolving this issue? I believe that Craig, who had always been emotionally unavailable for me for a really long time, has no say in judging me for what I did. If he would have been more receptive to my emotional stress and helped me overcome it, maybe I would not have had to look elsewhere for the emotional support that I needed. I am ready to put in the work to save my relationship and also my son from his father, but I am unsure of the path to take. It scares me to imagine a future without the emotional connection that I crave, but it also terrifies me to spend my life longing for something that may never come. TLDR. Cheated on my emotionally distant husband, got son's approval, husband punished me and my son. See advice, support, and resources to navigate this challenging situation. Update. Thank you for taking the time to read my story and offering your valuable input. It had been a week since Craig learned about the affair and locked me in the basement. Thankfully, Andrew had not come back to the basement. Andrew would sneak up to the basement and talk to me, letting me know that he was on his way to school or was back from school. He kept reassuring me that he was fine and was being well taken care of. I was relieved that at least Craig was not being a cruel person and taking good care of Andrew. Over the weekend, Craig pulled me out of the basement and asked me to freshen up to discuss matters that were important. I was dreading this conversation, as I knew that it was going to be gruesome. Andrew was away for a sleepover at one of his friends' places, and we had the entire day to ourselves to discuss our issues without any interruptions. Craig said that he had decided to cut me and Andrew off from the will and to donate every penny of his to an orphanage, without leaving anything behind for us. I don't mind him not mentioning me in the will, but I am more concerned about Andrew, who has an entire life ahead of him to live. How could he possibly cut his one and only son off? I was the one who cheated, so why was he putting Andrew through all of this? It is very difficult to reason with Craig at this point, as he has been treating me like a slave since he found out about the affair. I only see rage and anger every time I look at him, which makes it difficult for me to address any concerns I have regarding his behavior towards Andrew. He has stopped caring about Andrew and does not even bother checking on his progress as a father. This has impacted Andrew's performance at school to a great extent, but he blames me for all of it. Craig's refusal to acknowledge his own role in Andrew's struggles is causing significant harm to their relationship. It's clear that Craig is displacing his anger onto me rather than taking responsibility for his own actions as a father. This toxic dynamic is not only detrimental to Andrew's well-being, but it also prevents any productive communication about our concerns for his development. I decided that I could not let my mistakes ruin Andrew's life and future. I gathered enough courage to talk to Craig about it after Andrew left for school. I asked Craig if we could talk about Andrew. I told him that our issues have been affecting Andrew both mentally and emotionally. It would be better if we kept him out of all this mess. He laughed and told me that I was the one who was very adamant on having a baby when we were both clearly not ready for it. We were not even married when we had Andrew. He kept insisting that I abort and that we could have a baby when we were married and actually ready. I was the one who was not ready to listen to any of it. He did everything he could as a father, even when he was not willingly ready for it. I was the one who made it look like he was not a good husband to me and went ahead and had an affair with his tutor. Even after all of this being my fault, he was disappointed in Andrew taking my side when clearly I was in the wrong. He said that he was teaching Andrew that life is not fair, and that he had to live with the cards he has been dealt with. Unfortunately, his parents are not perfect people, and he had to deal with it. He had no right in taking sides, but the moment he did, he was already involved in all of this. Craig said that there was nothing more that he could do for me or Andrew. He clearly told me that I would not be getting a divorce, even if I begged him, as he believed that would be the easy way out for me. He told me that my punishment would be to see my son being miserable at school, not have anything left under his name, and keep cursing the moment when I had the thought of having an affair. I kept sobbing as those harsh words kept ringing in my ears. My affair had not only ruined my life but had also jeopardized my son's future. I had no idea that Craig would turn so bitter towards his own son that he would not even realize that all of his actions were ruining his son. I decided that I could not just sit and sob and do nothing about it. I retaliated to Craig's accusations that I had made his life miserable, which was a big fat lie. He had always been happy, and I made sure that I gave him enough space when he expected me not to interfere. I told Craig that he had no right to ruin Andrew's life by disowning him as he was his only child. Craig then told me that he wasn't really sure if Andrew was really his son. He would have believed it 2 weeks ago without any doubt, but after seeing my true colors, he feels that maybe I rushed having a baby and getting married so that he does not find out who Andrew's real father is. I was dumbfounded by his mudslinging statements about me. I admit that I had cheated on him with Joseph, but there was never a day before Joseph appeared that I had ever even thought of cheating on Craig or, for that matter, even leaving him and getting a divorce. Because though I was unhappy, I still wanted to make this marriage work. How could he be so blinded by his anger and jealousy that he passes such vile statements about me, which he himself knew were not true? I told him that I would make sure that Andrew gets his share of his inheritance and also I would file for custody and domestic violence if he would not be willing to give me a divorce. There was no way I was going to stay with him after all the slander he had thrown my way. I told him to get ready and hire a good lawyer since he would need one. He laughed in my face and told me that it wouldn't be necessary because even if we went to court, there was no way I was going to get any alimony or child support or custody. He said that he would make sure everybody we know gets to know about my affair, as he would make sure that Joseph testified that I was the one who seduced him into having an affair. Also, Craig said that he knew this is how I would react, so he had already transferred all of his property to a charitable organization that would be handling his entire wealth. I could see the cunningness in his eyes and face that kept taunting me and letting me know that I had messed up and there was no way out for me. I never knew how he became such a wrong person to live with. I now wonder if it was good that he was emotionless, as now he has become so volatile and reactive that it is even impossible to talk to him without him getting angry. He told me that as a person, he tried keeping things to himself, but now that I had pushed him to a corner, he had no other option but to retaliate in a way that I understand and just follow his orders. I had no idea that my affair would unleash a monster. I kept praying to God to show some mercy on Andrew and make Craig change his mind. The only hope I have is from God to create a miracle that could help me and Andrew come out of this slump. Little did I know that my actions would have such devastating consequences. As the days went by, the weight of guilt and regret grew heavier, leaving me desperate for divine intervention. I clung to the belief that only a miracle could bring redemption and provide a way out of this dark chapter in our lives. For anyone reading this, I would like to say not to gamble with what you have. Try to grin and bear it, at least for the sake of your kids. Not every story ends in a fairy tale. Life is unfair and will always be. Try to make good choices and do not fall into temptation like I did and ruin everything you have. Thank you for reading and being a constant support for me. I appreciate all of your concerns for both me and my son. Please pray for us.